So it's been a while since I showed Helm's Deep, and obviously this isn't a custom scenario, but I have been told that this one is very worthwhile in terms of showing it. So I will go through the army compositions and we'll go through the defenders first. And of course the first thing to note is, unlike most Helm's Deep sieges, this one has the evil forces, in particular Isengard, on the defence. So that's something you don't really see a great deal of. So it's going to be good on the attack and evil on the defence. So we have Cole playing as Isengard, and I believe the one who sent me the replay was Pizza Maker 90, and he's going to be playing as the other Isengard army, so it is double Isengard on the defence. We've obviously got a lot of Uruk-hai infantry, we've got some half-orc Bane Guard as well. Uruk Reavers and Dunland veterans are all mixed into this big blob, and they've got them all ready to defend the walls. And the evil factions can be quite potent on the defence, simply because they do have a lot of cannon fodder that they can use for the initial choke points. And then back here, for the sort of the muscle in this initial defence, we have the Berserkers, of course, and if they can keep them out of the ranged fire, they should do very, very well for themselves. But moving up into the keep, and we'll go into surely what will be more of their more elite forces. So up here we have more Uruk-hai infantry. Down here we've got some guards of the Orthanc combined with some Uruk-hai pikemen. These guys will form a very tough to break down line, but they won't get very much killing done very quickly. And we also have these Uruk-hai crossbows. The crossbows in particular are going to be a very potent tool on the defence here. And then over here we've got a lot of pikemen in here as well. So the Uruk-hai are quite great in number, but they are still outnumbered in this situation, I believe, because of course it is a 3v2, I think. So Isengard will have the numbers disadvantage, and that usually means the defenders struggle quite a bit. We've got more crossbows, and then back here I would assume we have most of the really elite stuff. So we've got some Trolls of the White Hand, we've got some Nazkai bodyguard, 2 units of Nazkai bodyguard, perhaps some standard Nazkai in here as well, because I can see 2 Saruman's, so of course the Nazkai here. And then we also have a catapult. They do probably need to get the catapult out and down into the lower section, because back here it's not really going to be able to get a great deal of killing done, but we'll see if it turns out to be worth it. So now we shall have a look at the first attacking army, which is Gondor played by Twos, and he's got some Gondor militia and some Gondor infantry leading the line here with these siege towers, which presumably he intends to get onto the walls very quickly. And these are very good first men in, because they won't die too easily. The Gondor infantry and the Gondor militia are pretty decent, because of course they are the only sort of standard militia unit for the Kingdoms of Men on the good faction side that is not a spear unit. So they don't have the spear malus. They do of course have relatively low base stats, so it is going to be quite challenging for them still. But you do need to have some cannon fodder when you're on the attack. We also have some Gondor spearmen pushing this ram. And then back here, the main bulk of his army, presumably where some of the more elites are, we have some Citadel archers back here. These guys could be very useful, provided they stay out of the crossbow fire. And so, you know, save them till towards the end, and they could be very useful. Or you could push them up early and hope that the crossbows don't target them. And then back here we've got some more Gondor spearmen and infantry to form sort of give them some more numbers in the second wave, which is going to be the more potent one. These Lasarnak nobles are going to be very, very important. They're one of the few units Gondor has, which is really good against Isengard because of that AP. We also have some Wardens of the White Tower, another very elite unit, and then some Sons of the Argonath and some Shielded Fountain Guard. They've also got some cavalry, so presumably they were a bit scared of some wargs coming out and charging down their men, but the General's Bodyguard is not going to be too useful in this situation, but we'll see if maybe they can use it to sort of push through some initial defences. And then we've got some Citadel Guard back here guarding the Gondorian catapult. So now I think we'll move over to here, and we have Lothlorien, played by Second Pink. He's got some Sindar Blade Masters carrying the ladder, although at the front here we've got 3 units of Sylvan Axemen who have got their armour upgrades. These guys are a very, very good unit, and they will be very useful against Isengard as well, because AP is very important to bring against them. We've also got some Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen, again very skillful, will be very good if they can match up against the Berserkers. And then we've got Sindar Archers, Galathrim Veteran Warriors, and some Sentinels of the Woodland Realms. Again, these 3 are going to be very potent, provided they can avoid the crossbows, and even in melee, these guys are going to be very strong. And then we've got some Woodland Warriors back here, so some cheaper shock units, but they're still going to be quite effective, and a catapult. So all around, a pretty decent Lothlorien army. They don't have much in the way of numbers, but hopefully they can provide that skill to cut through those Uruk-hai en masse. And then finally we have the Kingdom of Arnor, played by Jova. He's got some Arnorian heavy archers again, slightly more affordable archers, which might be the way to go in this situation. He's got some Arnor men-at-arms and some Arnor militia pushing the towers, just like Gondor. So he's gone for a sort of similar setup here, and then he's got some Arthur Dane men-at-arms. These guys very similar, but slightly better than the Gondor infantry currently. Quite a lot of them, in fact. And then he's also got some Arnor pikemen. These guys could be very, very important, because they need to be the ones to match up against the Uruk-hai. Then we've got some Dunedain Wardens. Back here we've got some dismounted Arthur Dane Knights, a couple of units of battle-ready Dunedain, a couple of units of dismounted, well, 3 units of dismounted Dunedain Knights actually. That's quite interesting. So he spent most of his money on that. If they can stay away from the really elite armor-piercing Isengard units, they will do very well for themselves against these sort of lower-tier Isengard units. And now, we shall begin. I've got some new headphones, so unfortunately my old ones broke, so we're going to have to see how well they cope in this situation. The mic is a separate entity entirely, though. And as we can see, Gondor are going to be the first wave in. And this first wave, comprised of Gondor infantry, militia and some spearmen, is not going to do too well against Isengard. Gondor in general in the current patch are a pretty poor matchup for Isengard if the funds are all equal. Isengard have got a lot of really nice tools to deal with them. Gondor in general are a little bit lackluster this patch anyway, but factions like Isengard in particular, the crossbows and all of the AP they can bring to bear, from the lower tier Dunland veterans and Uruk Reavers right up to the really scary Nazkai units. You have a lot of very nice options, and also the Bane Guard, which the Bane Guard, haven't seen a great deal of these guys used, to be honest with you. Even though they are quite a decent unit, I believe actually in terms of stats they are slightly better than the Uruk Reavers, but the increased cost, I think, when people go for sort of shock units, they either want sort of bargain prices or they want the increased effectiveness. Sort of the mid-range shock infantry people tend to steer clear of, and for good reason, because it's harder for you to get your money's worth in a short amount of time for a more expensive unit like that. Nonetheless, the Bane Guard should do very well in this situation, even if they're up against the lightly armoured Gondor militia, because of course militia tier units are just not going to be sufficient to deal with Bane Guard. This is quite a long Helm's Deep battle as well. But yes, I do like the fact that he's put all of his AP units up front. He's got a unit of Uruk-hai infantry over there as well, but mostly what he's got here up on the walls are the AP to deal with those armoured Gondorian troops. Although it looks like he's stopped. So the siege towers are coming in here, and it looks like this Gondor infantry is going over here. That Gondor militia is going to get absolutely destroyed by berserkers. And they won't get much damage done at all to them. Those hit points are going to be enough so that those little swords that the Gondor militia hold are just going to bounce right off. And also they're being reinforced with Dunland veterans. This is interesting because usually there is a bombardment phase on this map. So it's going to be interesting to see like a full wall fight, which is something you don't get to see an awful lot, because most of the time bombardment is the way to go. But in this situation, I would say, I mean, if I was the attackers, I would still bombard, to be honest with you, because with the numbers that Isengard have on the defence, it's something that you're not really used to when you're on the attack, to deal with a force in such numbers. I mean, look at how thick the wall is stacked over here. It's going to be very difficult for the initial Gondorian wave to get a foothold, and they're going to need reinforcements very quickly. But as we can see, this Gondor militia has come up, and the Uruk-hai infantry is over here. Uruk-hai infantry and berserkers. So it's going to be a very bad day for these Gondor militia, man. And over here we have the Bane Guard. Looks like the Bane Guard are going to be taking on Arnor militia, which in terms of a militia unit, probably the best in the game. Still these berserkers. And again, Petermaker 90 and Cole just stacking up together. Very much a unified defence over here. You can see that this Gondor militia, it's not going to get very far against the Uruk-hai infantry at all. The Uruk-hai infantry, in terms of blunt effectiveness, one of the best mainline units in the game, in my opinion, simply because they combine the numbers of the orcs with slightly more quality. Similar in many ways to the Morannon units of Mordor. Though of course Mordor have got a few other tools as well, so the Gondor infantry is now on the walls as well, but again, they're going straight into the welcoming arms of the Bane Guard with their AP. So this Gondor infantry probably isn't going to get too far. But yes, it looks like Rohan was unsuccessful in their defence of Helm's Deep, and so the Free Peoples of Middle-earth had to turn their armies around. And again, you can see that all the wall, except this section here, which they might want to knock down with a catapult. And actually over here, because the Uruk-hai infantry were not stacked up very thick on this side, the Gondor militia has actually managed to get a foothold on the wall. They will still lose very handily in melee to the Uruk-hai infantry and the berserkers, but still, a little bit of a break for them. There's that the one Gondorian with a Zweihander there. Now the Arnorian militia coming forth as well. The Gondor spearmen are knocking down the gate. In fact, they knocked down the gate, but obviously they're not going to go in on their own because it would be suicidal. You can actually see over here as well the Gondor infantry. 2 units of Gondor infantry have actually managed to get up onto this wall, and with the Uruk Reavers here, the Uruk Reavers alone are not going to be able to stop these Gondor infantrymen. So the Gondor infantry, despite the fact that initially the Isengard players had set up their defence quite well, I feel as though that the small gaps they left, and Gondor's armoured heavy infantry able to get in there, the pathfinding there of those berserkers, in particular the Dunland veterans, had to go down the stairs in order to go back up, but this does mean that the Gondor infantry is now sandwiched, and they are going to be taking that AP damage. But this is good for Gondor. They have managed to get a foothold up on the wall, and if they can keep the pressure up, because it doesn't look like there's a lot of ranged fire raining down. There is some coming from the attackers, so the Citadel archers are firing. But the crossbows of Isengard are sort of saving their ammo, which is probably wise considering the elite forces which are to come. You can see over here this Gondor infantry doing quite well, but they are shaken in the face of the large axes of the Uruk Reavers. In particular, there are still these berserkers hanging around throughout the line. So this Gondor militia routed and broke. Unsurprisingly, they weren't able to make many inroads on this very thickly defended section of the wall. And these Gondor infantrymen, they're wavering as well in the face of Baneguard and Uruk-hai infantry. So things aren't going too well for the first wave in places, but I feel as though if they, if they can get some more men up onto the walls, but in particular slightly more elite forces, so maybe not spearmen, but a unit like the Lasarnak nobles wouldn't go amiss up here, simply because they would be able to do much better against the more armoured Uruk-hai infantry and Dunland veterans. You can see that the militia units are just routing as soon as they get up on the wall, pretty much. You can see that the combination, the Arnor militia haven't done too well here. The Arnor militia have already taken quite a few hefty losses. But the Arnor men-at-arms are here, very similar to the... Well, they're not as good as the Gondor infantry, to be honest, but they are cheaper, so their loss won't be felt quite as keenly. There's a lot of Baneguard still here. You can see that there's still some more Arnor men-at-arms, but yeah, I would suggest that probably some more elite units need to be brought up onto this walls. In fact, the Uruk-hai crossbows are here now, and they are targeting down these Gondor infantry, and the Gondor infantry is wavering and routed. They do need to be careful with their crossbow ammunition, because the crossbows, of course, are a very, very important part of what's going to make this Isengard defence successful. Again, these Gondor infantry are actually pushing forwards. They're going to be pushing right into the hands of berserkers, though. And that, that volley is going to be pretty successful in taking them down as well. But yes, the crossbows here for Isengard, they're going to be relying on them to deal with particularly the elite units from the enemy. Especially stuff like the Galathrun veterans and the Sindar archers from the elves, because those units in particular in melee, Isengard are very good when dealing with armoured units, but Lothlorien, of course, not very armoured at all, and the skill may be difficult for them to overcome, but the crossbows will be able to punch through that. Melee defence is not going to stand you in good stead against a volley of crossbow bolts. But then again, crossbows do have a lot of ammo in the current patch. This Arnor militia is not having a good day up here. The Baneguard doing a very good job at holding them back. Meanwhile, if we look over here as well, the Arnor men-at-arms tend to just be dying as soon as they hit the floor, which is exactly what you want to see as the defenders. The attackers not really able to get a foothold at all. The Arthedain men-at-arms will follow them up, however, and the Arthedain men-at-arms are coming in over here as well. And the Arthedain, as I said, slightly better even than the Gondor infantry. But they may struggle here. They might be able to get a foothold over here, actually, because the defenders are a little bit thin on the ground. They have units they can send in to support. Dunland veterans all over the place. There's also Uruk-hai infantrymen and crossbows. They're pushing up another siege tower, so they're not actually going for the... they're not actually going to break down the walls, which does mean that all the catapults they brought, I would question why you brought so many catapults if you didn't intend to tear down some walls, because Helm's Deep is not the sort of map where you can use the catapults inside the keep too easily. It's possible that you could, if the battle went a certain way, but it is a bit of a gamble to bring them if that's, your thinking. We've got these Dunland veterans, only 98 of them, but you can see that these Gondor infantrymen, once again, have managed to get up onto the walls, and they're going to engage the Dunland veterans. The Dunland veterans are a AP, but they are a lower tier infantry unit. I am a fan of them, though. They can be very effective, simply because of how cheap they are and the fact that they do deliver that AP damage. I think they're only 400 florins. You can see that the Uruk-hai crossbows up on the walls are starting to fire into the backs of some of these Gondorian units. So Gondor sending up another wave. And in fact, if we look over here, you can see that the Woodland Warriors from Lothlorien have also come forward. The Woodland Warriors will do slightly better in this situation. You can see that they're not being slaughtered quite so easily. They're still losing, though, simply because of the amount of orcs that are here. But against Uruk-hai infantry in particular, this is a unit which is going to do very well for itself. Again, another quite cheap shock unit, which can be brutally effective. They're sending forward another unit. They do need to be careful not to just feed kills into Isengard, because Isengard's primary sort of... The advantage of being an evil faction on the defence is simply because you can throw so much at the initial defence, whereas if you're someone like the elves, you need to be careful in how you pace themselves. Isengard, meanwhile, they're able to hold them at bay a little bit more easily. And of course, this is not a custom scenario, so people were free to pick their armies as they will, and I would say that the funds are quite reasonable given the armies that are on show. You can see over here though, the Arthedae Man-at-Arms says defeats, well, the Bouncer Force is evenly matched now. The Vanguard are AP, but you can see that they've been in battle against Militia and the unit of standard Men-at-Arms. So now they're starting to take quite a few attritional casualties, which does mean that this unit of Arthedae Men-at-Arms will be enough to get a foothold up on this wall over here for Arnor. Arnor in general, the Arthedae Men-at-Arms have done very well for themselves. We've got some Dunland veterans coming up the stairs over here to get involved in the fight. We've got, you know, just individual patches of Uruk-hai all over the place. We've got this unit of Uruk-hai infantry which has not been committed yet, which I think is going to be sent in against the Arthedae Men-at-Arms, which will stabilise that line for Isengard. We've also got those crossbows still firing, but the fact that Isengard are using their crossbows early is actually a good thing for the attackers, despite the fact that they are losing quite a lot of their sort of bread and butter units because of it. It's better than sort of seeing a whole unit of Sons of Argonath get melted. You can see that these Berserkers, they might be retreating. Well, actually, they're just being taken out of the fight so they don't take too many casualties, but that is a worthwhile tactic. You can actually see that the Uruk-hai crossbows are also being focused down by the Gondor Citadel archers. The Woodland Warriors are back there as well, which is a good move. There's also standard Gondor archers, because of course the crossbows, they actually do lose some of their effectiveness as the unit goes down in size, simply because the full unit, when you see a volley of crossbow bolts come in, it's so vicious. And you can see over here actually that entire unit of Arthedae Man-at-Arms has just been flattened by the Gondor, well, by the Uruk-hai crossbows. But there wasn't a huge amount of Uruk-hai crossbows in the Isengard sort of armies, it would seem. So we'll see how this goes. You can see that these Arthedae Man-at-Arms have charged down the stairs, but they've only got as far as these Uruk-hai. And the Uruk-hai will stop them in their tracks. There's also just some Dunland veterans in reserve over here, so it does look like they've managed to sort of force off another wave. But if we look over here, again, this is the sort of... Ooh, hello. I've missed quite a lot over here, it would seem, because the Uruk-hai pikes are over here, but Lothlorien have come forward in a big way in this section over here. And as you can see, the Sylvan Axemen, brutally effective against Isengard. The shields stand in pretty good stead against their ranged threats, and the AP that they do in melee, and of course, because they're elves, they're very skilled as well. They absolutely... But you can see that the crossbow bolts are being turned on them, they're being shot in the back, which is absolutely what they need, because Isengard is starting to struggle in this situation over here. And we can see that these Uruk-hai pikemen, to be fair, there's not a huge amount of dead bodies over here at the moment. But you can see that these spearmen, they push through the fight and they're now getting up onto the walls, going after these Uruk-hai archers, but you can see that these Uruk-hai infantry are going to close in on these spears. But the Gondor spears now fighting up on the walls over here, so the keep is actually being assaulted more so than the lower sections of the walls, which is interesting. And you can see that pushing in, they're bringing forward some pretty serious units here, because Gondor are sending forward their shielded Fountain Guard, which means that it doesn't matter what Isengard do, this attack is here to stay for the time being, provided they get into melee. But you can see that this unit of Sylvan Axemen over here is being sort of cut down by the Uruk-hai infantry, supported by the crossbows up on the walls. You can also see those crossbows shooting into the shielded Fountain Guard. There's also some Gondor militia that returned from routing being sent in as sort of cannon fodder over here. Oof, that frame rate, if I just turn it around so we're not looking at the gaping maw of all of those units. Oh, I see, I think there might be... yeah, that's why the frame rate's going down. So they are now starting to knock down the walls. I think they realised over here that the situation was sort of rapidly turning against them, in the sense that they were losing a lot of their sort of units that they need to form the spine of their army. Again, you can't win a battle with just elites alone. Those Arthedae Men-at-Arms are routing. So Isengard are winning over here, but they are sort of... oof, that frame rate. WK told me a fix for that, but I've completely forgotten what it was. I'll have to go and look through the comments again to find that, because it was very useful. You can see that the crossbows are shooting these spearmen, but also... oh dear. Friendly fire en masse. So Woodland Warriors were going up that tower, and a bit of poor communication from the team there, because that's a very hefty amount of that unit that was just lost. Those Uruk-hai infantry are also going to block the advance of what remains of that unit, which is not very many men, to be fair. See, the crossbows over here, though, they may be shooting the spears, but they are arcing their shots, which I'm not really sure why, but if you see your crossbows arcing their shots, it's definitely worth your time sort of ceasing firing, because the stopping power of the crossbows is lost when you sort of see that arc. A little bit, anyway. The crossbows are still quite potent, but also... spearmen are not really the sort of unit that I'd be going after with the crossbows anyway. The Uruk-hai infantry and melee will do a pretty decent number on these guys. Meanwhile, if you look down here, you can see that the Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen and the Shielded Fountain Guard have moved forward, and the Uruk-hai over here are really starting to struggle now. You can see that there is a hefty amount of pikemen back here, forming up a very scary looking pike wall. The pikes are now also being committed forwards. The pikes will actually, you know, they should be able to get a decent amount of damage done to the Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen, because they're not the most heavily armoured units in the world, and they don't have HP. But the Shielded Fountain Guard are just going to form such a solid centre to this position over here. And you can see that the gate has actually been blown through now, so the Sylvan Axemen, they are starting to sort of lose now. You know, they don't have enough men in their unit to keep this up, and also the crossbow fire into their backs is just too severe. But having said that, the Sylvan Axemen have done their job. They've managed to force their way in here. I saw the catapult shot through the gate, which leads me to believe they're trying to sort of take down another section of wall. Let's go and have a look down here, shall we? You can actually see the Woodland Warriors. The Woodland Warriors are the ideal unit to be going after the Uruk-hai infantry with, usually. But this unit of Woodland Warriors, of course, took very severe losses when half of it was in that tower and died. So this Uruk-hai infantry, it might win this, but whenever the next wave comes up, Isengard are going to start to struggle down here. See the Sentinels of the Woodland Realms as well. Lothlorien's archers still there, and in the late game, if Isengard don't have those crossbows to deal with that, they're going to be in trouble. You can see that these... Oh dear, that's a huge amount of... So that makes up for the friendly fire. A huge amount of the Isengard force is falling. And it might be time for Isengard to sort of abandon this lower section now, because as soon as the next wave comes forward, they're going to be gone. It looks like that's what's happening. Cole, I think, is going to be retreating some of his Uruk-hai infantry. They're going to be retreating what's left of their Uruk-hai crossbows as well as what they can of their berserkers, because with all of these gaps in the wall, they don't have enough men down here anymore to hold the wall. So good work by the attackers. They've managed to sort of turn around their fortunes there. Meanwhile, if we look over here, Gondor is sending forward yet more elites. So Gondor certainly is the first one in. The Wardens of the White Tower, definitely one of the strongest sword and board units in the game at the moment. In terms of blunt effectiveness, they are essentially just as good as the dismounted Dunedain Knights, of which there are 3 of those in the Arnorian army. But they will have paid a price for that in terms of their army is going to be significantly smaller for having brought those 3 units. There's a lot of crossbow fire coming in on them though. Again, the crossbows targeting the elite units, the armoured elite units as well, so they're trying to get really the most for their money. They're doing a very good job as well. So the Wardens of the White Tower, with all of this crossbow fire, they should go down pretty quickly. Also those Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen taking a hefty amount of damage there from the crossbows. And you can see over here that the Lasarnak nobles sent up to support the spearmen have been pretty heftily chopped down. Again, these Trolls of the White Hand were sent forward. Again, though, there's only 3 Trolls left. So that does mean that the Trolls have largely been expended. Again, sending them in against Lasarnak nobles is not the best move. Lasarnak nobles are a pretty effective counter to Trolls. And these Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen up on the walls. Again, skillful Elven units are always going to beat sort of Orc units focused around numbers 1-to-1. So these Uruk-hai infantry are going to start to struggle. Again, the crossbows are still firing. Crossbows doing a very effective job against those Wardens of the White Tower. And you can see over here the addition of these Uruk-hai pikemen. You know, the pike and crossbow combination for Isengard has managed to sort of stem the bleeding over here. And despite Gondor's aggression, he's not really been able to effect a sort of really strong advance. Most of the work here in terms of pushing back the enemy was done by the Sylvan Axemen quite quickly. And this is the problem that Gondor have against Isengard. But nonetheless, the elites of Gondor, they still have those Sons of Argonath somewhere. They still have a few units smattered around the battlefield. And well, if we look over here, you can see that some of the more severe Lothlorien units are also being sent forward down here. So some Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen. And again, Baneguard, veterans, you know, they're sort of lower to mid-tier units which are easily going to be cut to pieces by very skillful High Elven Heavy Swordsmen. And the Uruk-hai infantry are not going to do too much better, to be honest with you. But they are still holding a line down here. I'm surprised, actually, that the forces over here, there's still some Isengard forces over here. There's actually still some Berserkers in melee down here. I'm surprised that Isengard didn't pull back. You can see here, if we just get very close, the Berserkers, they don't know the meaning of the word retreat, I suppose. They're fighting against Arthedain men-at-arms over here, which ordinarily would be a good thing for them, but of course they've been in combat for so long. And they don't have the well, they have no armour. All of their survivability comes from their 2 HP. And now they're going to be overwhelmed. So over here, Arnor are going to be able to break through. There's still some smatterings of Uruk-hai. There's still some more Berserkers over here. There's also these Dunland veterans. But ultimately, the sheer amount of the more elite Arthedain troops, are those the Arthedain Knights as well? No, these are just Arthedain men-at-arms. So the men-at-arms coming forward, the more elite, more dependable Arnorian mainline troop is going to be what ultimately sends the defenders over the edge down here. And you can see sending forward some Gondorian archers. They've taken a few losses. So what's this? The Citadel archers taking a hefty beating there, although they've got their swords out, so it's definitely not worth going after them with your... actually, they've got their bows back out. Even so, I would suggest that Isengard are pretty decent against ranged threats like the Citadel archers. Definitely better off going up against the Galathrim veteran warriors, in my opinion, who are firing their missiles out here for some reason. What are they going after? They're going after the Bane Guard. Again, the veteran warriors, with how good their arrows are, should definitely be being saved for the end. Again, you could really do a number on those Nazkai in the back, which ultimately are going to be the last line of defence as Isengard all the time in a siege, so you're going to have to sort of bear in mind that as the attackers when you're against Isengard who are on the defence. It's quite a rare matchup, but just always bear in mind they're going to have the Nazkai bodyguard and standard Nazkai at the back, which you're going to need to be able to deal with. And over here you can see that the pikemen managed to hold the line, and ultimately the swordsmen as well. The crossbows are what's doing most of the damage here, which does mean that later on they're probably going to run out of ammunition. Crossbows, of course, do have a lot, and you can see there the shielded fountain guard of all things routing. Madness. There's still a lot of forces up here, so there's still a lot of Uruk-hai, but a lot of it is going to be crossbows, and as soon as they run out of ammunition they're not going to be as good. There's also archers over here. Uruk-hai archers are definitely not the last word in terms of quality. So while that may look like the defenders have got a lot left, as soon as they run out of crossbow ammunition they're really going to struggle against the elites of the attackers. And even if they don't, you know, if the attackers could choose to engage them in such a way which makes the crossbows difficult to use again. I like the idea of Gondor going up onto the wall. They just didn't... I don't think they led the way with the right unit. Spearmen are not going to be able to give you the penetration that you need. Leading the way with the Lasarnak nobles I think would have been better, especially if they were backed up by the Sylvan heavy swordsmen, and then sending the spearmen after that to sort of reinforce the position with a more melee defence focused unit. Meanwhile, if we look down here, the Sylvan heavy swordsmen have actually been stopped largely. I mean, they've taken quite a few casualties, but ultimately down here, I think that's largely again due to the crossbows that are over here. Cole's crossbows that have been firing for a long time, but then they have lost quite a few men in their unit. The Citadel archers still firing away as well. The Sentinels of the Woodland Realm sent into melee. Again, more bolts coming in, more elves falling. It's a good scrap this so far, but here comes the real problem for Isengard. You can see now that the Arthedain men-at-arms, the floodgates have opened, the berserkers have fallen, and this ultimately means that this unit of Uruk-hai infantry has been kept in reserve to sort of halt that advance, I think. And they're actually sending out more men, so they're sending forward more crossbows, so they're going to try and hold the line with just this one unit of Uruk-hai infantry, and I guess use the crossbows. Unless those crossbows are out of ammunition, in which case they'll be committed to melee, which I'm not really sure I agree with too much. But that is a sign that Isengard are running out of crossbow ammunition, if so, which I think they have, because they've got their scimitars out. Or machetes. I think the Uruk-hai weapon is more of a machete than a scimitar, to be fair. It's not really a slashing weapon, it's more of a chopping weapon. I think it has more in common with an axe, to be honest with you, than a sword in the way it's supposed to be used. But yeah, these crossbows are out of ammunition, so they are being committed to melee. Going up against these Arthedain men-at-arms, of course. The Uruk-hai crossbows, they've got decent armour value, so they won't fall quite so quickly in melee to these non-AP units. But ultimately they aren't an infantry unit, so they will fall by the wayside pretty quickly when all is said and done. But if you look outwards, you know, Arnor have still got their elites left. You know, they've still got a few units over here. There's still a few units around the corner for the elves as well. But the attackers are sort of starting to run a little low at this point. And actually we can see over here that the General's Bodyguard for Gondor, this is where they will actually be useful. I don't think those crossbows are going to be able to get away. Actually, yes they will because of the hill. But now the hammer and anvil can begin. So the General's Bodyguard can come in. So the cavalry was somewhat useful. I think for the cost, a General's Bodyguard is still not going to be worth it in this situation. But the Gondorian General's Bodyguard, and I think they realise at this point that all is lost, so Cole is going to try and save what he can, try and save that unit of Uruk-hai infantry for later, which is definitely worthwhile, because Uruk-hai infantry is a decent unit that you're going to want to save, adding a bit of mass to your defence, but ultimately they did manage to push them back out of the gate, so all of that work done by the Sylvan Axemen initially has largely gone to waste. And over there, that is a catapult shot, and that is a hugely effective hit there on those Guards of Orthanc, so There you go, Lothlorien. It was definitely worth bringing a catapult. It's very threading the needle indeed. You know, this is not usually the sort of thing you can do on Helm's Deep. But yeah, they need to get out of that alcove, because otherwise the Lothlorien catapult is going to do huge amounts of damage. These Uruk-hai archers are being sent in. I'm not sure why, to be honest with you. These Uruk-hai archers, they're just going to die out here. They're not going to accomplish a great deal, although they are absorbing some arrow fire, so that ultimately might be worth it. But most of the time when I have an archer unit that's out of ammunition, I like to use them to sort of help reinforce the line in terms of mass. I don't really like sending them forward on their own, simply because they're not going to get any kills and they're just going to die for nothing, essentially. But they are absorbing some arrow fire, so ultimately it might be worth it. We'll see. You can see over there the dismounted Dunedain Knights. There's Sons of Argonath. There's more Lasarnak nobles, and then leading the way up here we've got some Dunedain Rangers from Arnor. What is this over here? These Galathrin veterans, they still have ammunition and they're going to be shooting point blank into these pikes, which is going to be bad. I mean, you can see there that the armour on the Uruk-hai pikes is pretty substantial, so they won't die like too easily. But even so, they are pikes. They're not really designed to be taking arrow fire. Might even be worth going out to try and engage those units, because neither Dunedain Rangers nor Galathrin veterans have got huge armour values, I don't think, especially not the Rangers. And pikes do, you know, if pikes are going to get kills, it's going to be against lightly armoured units. They don't have the most stats in terms of damage. It's their formation which really makes pikes so brutally effective. Some Bane Guard up here. Although I'm actually not sure that, yeah, they won't be able to use that doorway to get up onto the wall, because obviously, for those of you who don't know, you can go up this wall as the attacker, go through that door, and it will spit you out up here. But ultimately, I don't think the attackers are going to be able to do that, because to do that, you have to go up these stairs and then go along here. But as you can see, they've knocked down the wall. There's still quite a few men down here. I think Arnor in particular has managed to pace themselves quite well in this fight. You can see that the catapult crew, so they're out of ammunition, I would assume. They're being committed to melee. Lothlorien and Gondor have certainly taken the brunt of Isengard's ire, in particular those crossbow bolts, and that may work to Arnor's favour in the end. Do Arnor have Troll Slayers? There's still some Sindar archers back there. There's those Dunedain Wardens, Arnorian heavies. It's hard to say. They might be hiding, because of course Troll Slayers can hide, but Troll Slayers are definitely something that I would bring against Isengard. That AP, both at range and in melee, is going to be pretty substantial. So you can see that the pikes did sort of retreat around the corner, which is wise. There's a unit of 11 Uruk-hai infantry over there. Now the Galathrin veterans are coming in first, which is not the worst idea, because if Isengard do choose to engage the Galathrin veterans in melee, well, the Galathrin veterans are going to do very well, because they are a very accomplished infantry unit as well. They don't have the most ammo though. The attackers do need to be quite cautious here, which is why I can see these sort of hit and run tactics with their archers, because they don't have the advantage in terms of numbers, I don't think, at least not substantially. Not to the point where they could afford to just sort of push through and be hyper aggressive. As you can see, it's a very close battle in terms of the percentages. You can see these Uruk-hai crossbows still have ammunition. What they are going after, I'm not quite sure. Ultimately, I think if this was the only unit that had ammunition left, I would probably save it. I think they were going after the Sindar archers, to be fair, which is a worthwhile target, because they are very effective in melee as well. And you can see that leading the way, we have the Gondor Citadel archers. So archers that are out of ammunition being traded on both sides, essentially. And again, you can see the Sindar archers performing hit and run duties on these pikes as well. Dealing with Isengard's pikes is one of the things you're going to have to keep in mind as well, particularly if they're defending. Pikes are going to be a huge part of what makes up their defence, usually. It would be to their detriment if they weren't present in the Isengard army. So you're going to have to come up with a way of either skirmishing them or pushing right through them. And in this situation, with the factions that were chosen and the army compositions that were chosen, definitely skirmishing them down is the right way to go. You can see that skirmishing is not going to work quite so well on the guards of Orthanc. But ultimately there are also some Sylvan heavy swordsmen, as well as Arthedain men-at-arms, so a genuine push is coming through the alcove. But Isengard will stand firm, should stand firm here anyway. You can see that there's sort of tattered remnants of the outer defence which can be committed to sort of hold this position. Again, the archers are trying to go after these crossbows and they will get some kills. But ultimately it's a pretty difficult shot to make. What are they going after? They're going after the Rangers. Again, that's a lightly armoured unit. It's not the worst thing in the world for the attackers to be losing, because they're not exactly the most effective in melee either. They've got some decent sort of melee stats in terms of skill, but ultimately they are still a little bit lightweight. Those pikemen over there. And you can see that the fight at the gate has started once again. And this time, instead of regular spearmen, it is Citadel Guard. They are taking crossbow bolts, but ultimately they are having to arc their shots. The Citadel Guard, of course, far superior to the Gondorian spearmen. And again, it's not the best shots that these crossbows have. It might still be enough to do substantial damage to the Citadel Guard unit as a whole, but it won't be as efficient as it could otherwise have been. And over there you can see these Bane Guard up on the wall over here, just sort of preventing them from sort of flanking around and going directly for the town centre through that garrison over there. But it's really back here that Isengard have got most of their really scary strength. So they've got their Nazkai bodyguard. They've still got some units of healthy pikemen as well. Some slightly battered infantry, but they also have that catapult, which has not been used yet. I'll be interested to see if they do save it for the town centre, if it can be effective, because I've never seen the defenders on this map save their artillery for the very last layer. Usually the fight is all but over, but at that point. You can actually see over here that the Guards of Orthanc, with their mass, have actually pushed outwards, and victory seems certain. Again, most of that is because the units that have been sent in over here are lower tier, so the sort of superior mass of the Guards of Orthanc means they push back. Guards of Orthanc, in terms of like what you would expect them to be based on their name and based on their appearance, they are maybe a little bit underwhelming, but ultimately they do still fulfill the role of being like an armoured spearman that can add mass to your line. In the current map patch in general, spears are a little bit underwhelming anyway, so it's hopefully in the next patch we'll see the Guards of Orthanc given the love they deserve, because they are a pretty nice looking unit, to be fair. Next to the more iconic standard Uruk-hai that make up most of Isengard's forces, the Citadel Guard have taken a few losses to the crossbows, but ultimately an armoured spearman like this is actually pretty ideal to go up against the pikemen with. The mass, I mean, to be honest with you, if I were Gondor at this point, I would just commit forward what you have and push through these pikes, because otherwise the pikes will still do some damage. Let's see these Uruk-hai crossbows getting up onto the wall, I think. There's more crossbows as well. I don't know whether these guys have got ammunition or not. They've got their machetes out, so I wouldn't be so sure. If Isengard have run out of crossbow ammo entirely, that's going to make the final stand difficult. They're going to need to rely on their catapult quite a bit. Meanwhile, we can see the Sindar Blade Masters looming. Definitely not the sort of unit Isengard can deal with too easily. And the Guards of Orthanc doing a very good job against these lower tier units that the enemy have decided to feed to them. There's that pipeline in the background as well, which has taken quite a lot of damage. I mean, the attackers still have got quite a big range presence. You've got these Dunedain Rangers, and also the Sindar Archers back there. But ultimately, the attackers might be running a little bit low on ranged sort of power as well, which is going to leave. And as you can see over there, the crossbows I think are going after the Galathrin veteran warriors. Definitely worthwhile, because they're one of the strongest infantry units as well as archer units that the attackers have. Taking a few more losses as well. You can see that sort of 2 or 3 of them fall every volley, which is definitely a decent return on the crossbows, despite not going after a heavily armoured unit. If it's still an elite unit, it's going to be worth it. It looks like Gondor is getting ready for a bigger push as well, because the Sons of Argonath are getting ready to be sent in. Definitely one of the scarier units that the attackers have on their roster, especially considering that you know, the Galathrin veterans are being sort of focused down, and the Dunedain Knights are not really ideal to go after the Nazkai with. The Nazkai in general are going to be a bit of a difficult one for the attackers to take on, but the outer Isengard defence can't last forever, you get the feeling. We shall see. But we are, well, more or less, I think we're just over the halfway point in this battle, and it's still very, very close. You can see that the attackers have lost 67%, the defenders have lost 66%. In this situation, usually, I would suggest this means the attackers are probably going to win, but that's usually because the orcs are on the attack and they've got a lot more men to burn. Whereas here, it's kind of the other way around. So it's still going to be very, very close. See those Citadel Archers getting out of the way. The attackers are attempting to use their skirmish power, which they're well within their rights to do, but they're struggling to do that because Helm's Deep, unless you can get into a set-up position on the attack, using your archers is very difficult, because obviously the defenders have just got such an effective fortress. Helm's Deep is very easily defendable. You can see though that dismounted Dunedain Knights and Sons of Argonath coming forward. That's something which may well buckle the Isengard line, particularly if the Citadel Guard come back and help them out as well. You can see there's really not a huge amount of Uruk-hai there. The crossbow's still firing, although some of those units, this is the unit that was sort of held back a little bit longer than most. And then there's this unit as well. All the rest of the crossbows I think are out of ammunition. These guys have got their machetes out, getting ready to be committed over into that fight over there, just to try and hold back the tide a little bit longer. Again though, this is still just largely the dregs that they're fighting over here. Not really the biggest loss for the attackers, not really the greatest gain for the defenders. Any kill is a good kill, of course, but you can see over here that Pizza Maker 90 has laid out his line in a very, very good way. I've always been a big fan of putting a shield wall in front of your pikes. It makes it harder for the pikes to be buckled, gives them a bit of protection, and spears have always been the most effective at that with their added mass. Sindar Blade Masters over there. You get the sense those Dunedain Rangers can't have too much more ammunition left, nor the Sindar Archers. So pretty soon the attackers are going to have to sort of roll the dice and try and smash through the Isengard line in some capacity, and I think they're going to try and do that over here, which is probably wise. You can actually see that these Gondor Citadel Archers are getting into the front line again, so they're going to try and do some more skirmish, which again I like, because they really do need to here. They need to knock out some of these pikemen as soon as the line is weak enough. And you can see that Isengard are actually falling back. This is the chance that Gondor and Isengard need to, well, Gondor and Arnor, not Isengard. They need to take this chance now. They need to smash through. They need to get up onto this wall, deal with these Bane Guard, and they need to sort of swamp this section over here, because if you look over here, Pizza Maker is sending forward more pikes to the other section. That alcove is going to be fiendishly difficult to break through. The pikes are not going to do huge damage, but it's going to make it so difficult for the attackers to smash through. You can see over here the Uruk-hai crossbows. They're ready. They've got their crossbows out still as well, so this unit still has ammunition. They might be waiting for the Lasarnak nobles to come forward, or they might be waiting for the Sindar archers to get into a bit more of a firing position. The Galathrim veterans took a few losses, but not a huge amount. We've also got those Arnor pikemen. Only one unit of Arnor pikemen, which I'm honestly quite surprised about. The Citadel Guard are coming forward again, being used as the first ones in. They're not going to get their killing done particularly quickly, but I think Gondor here is hoping that the mass is going to do the work for him. You can see that as soon as it turns into a melee fight, the pikes re-engage once more. To be fair though, at this point the Citadel Guard and the Sons of Argonath should be able to mop up what's left of the pikes here at the gate. Defeat is almost certain for Isengard apparently. I would not be so sure. This back section with the 2 Nazkai bodyguard and 2 standard Nazkai is going to be hugely difficult to defeat. There's also these crossbows which I think have fallen back. They were the ones firing at the Citadel Guard before, so they've sort of fallen back to the inner layer. Got those crossbows that have their machetes out still running around. The fight over here has not really developed at all. You know, the spears and the pikes in general just get their killing done exceptionally slowly. So Isengard I think are quite content to just sort of hold this area for as long as they can. You can see that the Sindar Blade Masters are coming forward now though, which is going to change the dynamic of this fight quite a bit, especially with that Dunedain Ranger fire going into the pikes. Sindar Blade Master is going to be able to pretty handily deal with the Guards of Orthanc, particularly after all the range fire they've been taking.
Afraid something changes in the course of battle, for defeat seems almost certain.
And yeah, I think they definitely the attackers certainly smell blood over here now. Gondor Citadel Archers being committed to the melee, Sons of Argonath, what's left of the Citadel Guard, and the dismounted Dunedain Knights. The realms of Gondor and Arnor united, and these pikes are not going to be able to hold this line for much longer, which sort of begs the question, what do the defenders do now? Because they're doing quite a good job on the alcove. I mean, the Sindar Blade Masters should mean that victory will be theirs, but I would say they probably need to retreat at this point. I would say the defenders probably need to get ready to just sort of bring it down to that last layer, the inner ring of Helm's Deep, and sort of try and defend there and there alone, because they do need to consolidate a bit here, because otherwise they're going to be in danger of being overwhelmed on several fronts, and then they're going to lose their advantage, which is ultimately having quite a lot of Uruk-hai left over. The Nazkai are good, but they're only going to be able to win the defenders the battle if they have enough chaff around them so that they don't take too much chip damage. You see the Gondor Citadel Archers have managed to push through, and they now have managed to sort of take up a decent position over here. They're going to be able to fire into those crossbows that are up on the wall, the bane of the attacker's existence in this fight. And there go the the arrows letting loose. I do like the way that the attackers have tried to use their skirmishes in this fight. You know, when they've come under too much pressure, they've retreated. But ultimately, if you see here, just the crossbow firing squad going to be able to do huge amounts of damage to those Citadel archers. And now we can see there, the Bane Guard are also attacking them in the side. So yeah, these Citadel archers are not going to be long for this world. So this is going to be another archer threat that the defenders are going to have gotten rid of. Because of course, if they only have the Nazkai left alive, there's nothing to stop the attackers from simply using their skirmishers to skirmish them to oblivion. It's a lot of hit points for sort of standard archers to get through, but they could still be within their rights to weaken them pretty substantially. Ultimately over here, I mean, if you look, Sons of Argonath, 47 remaining. The dismounted Dunedain Knights retreated, and that's going to be a pretty significant mistake, I think. Gondor here needs Arnor's support. Otherwise, they're just going to get shot up. And I know he doesn't want to lose many more men to the crossbows, but they need to force their way through. They need to either push their way through the gate or the alcove at this point, because they've dithered a bit too long, I think. Arnor initially, that sort of, and over here, yes, exactly. Getting up onto this wall and engaging the crossbows in melee is what they should have done probably a little earlier. Again, the crossbows are just such a brutal thing, and if ever you're facing a faction which is heavily based around crossbows, like Isengard, Rune is another very good example, you need to have a plan of how to deal with those crossbows. It's not always easy, and you're probably going to take quite a lot of damage from them. But if you can sort of limit their effectiveness as much as you can, it increases your chances of winning the battle pretty significantly. Meanwhile, if we go back over here to the alcove, you can see that Arthur Dane Men-at-Arms has been sent forward. Whatever happened to the Sindar Blade Masters? Are they still in this fight, or are they all dead? Or did they retreat? Oh, they retreated. They're going through the gate instead. So I think over here they're just content to sort of engage Isengard with basic units. So they have chosen the gate, essentially, as their way through. And I think they're doing that because they realise these dismounted Dunedain Knights are going to be able to get into these crossbows, into melee. And of course, crossbows, they don't stand a chance against Dunedain Knights. The Dunedain Knights, of course, been a unit since vanilla. And they've always been one of the strongest. In vanilla, it was only really the Dwarven heavy infantry that was better than they are. And of course, they're going to be easily able to defeat. There's also some standard Uruk-hai infantry up here, though. A unit of 119, no less. So some pretty substantial reinforcements. And the crossbows, I think, are trying to wriggle away. And again, Arnor is retreating. Again, I think Arnor's problem here is that he hasn't committed enough when his allies have needed it. Because Gondor and Lothlorien were plenty aggressive, and then it was up to Arnor to really drive through. And I think he's guilty of not doing that. And if ultimately that could end up losing them this fight. Having said that, these Sons of Argonath, there's only 39 of them left, but they have managed to sort of circumvent the pike line. And they're sort of hacking their way through this depleted unit of crossbows, but ultimately, you know, the crossbows are still coming in. In fact, the Nazkai are being committed. So it looks like Isengard might be content actually to just sort of sally out and try and defend this sort of outer layer of the fortress. If they're sending forward their Nazkai, obviously with what's left of the Sons of Argonath, the Nazkai are going to be able to pretty easily bring about their end. Although these Dunedain Knights sort of, they tried to get into the side of these pikemen. Victory seems certain for the pikemen, interestingly enough, so that, again, the Citadel Guard, they needed the support of those Dunedain Knights. And considering that the Arnorian player had 3 units of them, I'm just saying he may be a little bit too conservative, but over here you can see that the Arnor pikemen have been pushed forward. They're sort of poking the half-orc Bane Guard, and the Bane Guard are doing it. And obviously, all of this is sort of taken in the light that crossbows in the current patch do have too much ammunition. That is pretty much known at this point. But even so, like, I do think that the attackers did have the opportunity to do something about that. Ultimately, they used their skirmish as well, but if you see here, just mowing them down. Here come the Sindar Blade Masters, and again, using your mass to push through is something that if you're fighting against crossbows, you sometimes have to do, and you can see here that Pizza Maker is also sending out his Nazkai, so Isengard smell blood, or man flesh as it were. And yeah, it's still very close. In fact, Isengard have fallen behind in terms of percentages. So I mean, it's definitely not all over yet, but I do feel as though Arnor's conservative play may well be the cause of their downfall if Isengard's elite infantry is enough to turn this fight around. Of course, the Nazkai bodyguard are still back there. It's going to be a very, very difficult unit to take on. You can see here these Dunedain knights taking the damage of the crossbows that were held in reserve back in the town centre. Held in place by standard Uruk-hai infantry and then shot to death by crossbows. Very, very standard fare for Isengard. So here's Saruman, and there's another Saruman. Him and his doppelganger moving forward with their Nazkai. Again, I think in when it's translated, that translates as Folk of the Ring, which is interesting. As we sort of move through. I've also changed my shader now, so this should be, you know, and as seen by the frame rate not tanking whenever I go near the fight, this is significantly better. So it's not quite as nice as the one I was using before in terms of how it looks, but the frame rate is far better, and it is better than vanilla as well, so it's going to look nicer than the one in Hobbiton that I posted last. So yeah, I think I found the happy middle ground here. Reshader's got a lot of settings, and sometimes you mess it up. Here we can see Arnor pikemen again. They've taken a huge amount of losses. Isengard flooding forwards. So what do the attackers have left? They've got their cavalry, which is not going to be too effective in here with all the pikes running around. You know, the Nazkai as well, with those two-handed swords, are going to do a huge amount of damage. There's still a unit of Lasarnak nobles. And over there we've got a dismounted Dunedain knights, another unit of dismounted Dunedain knights, some dismounted Arthedain knights, Sindar archers, Galatharan veterans. You know, Arnor have still got a lot. They've still got battle-ready Dunedain as well. You know, Arnor, I would say they absolutely need to push forwards. Arnorian heavy archers are not really going to do the trick, but the Sindar blade masters at the front from Lothlorien certainly will. Uruk-hai crossbows that are out of ammunition and depleted units of infantry and pikes are not going to be good enough against that unit. Definitely a very effective unit, and they will be exclusive to Lothlorien in the next patch. Some of them have managed to sort of push their way through, which, considering elves are very lightweight units, is quite surprising, but then they're just going to get squashed by Nazkai. Nazkai, definitely one of the most fearsome units in the current patch. They've got a really cool name as well, Nazkai. Then you've got a unit of very depleted Sindar Blade Masters over here. They're still not going to be able to push their way through the pipeline, and I think the attackers, with their lack of options for dealing with the pikes, I think that's been one of the things which has worked against them, because usually you can expect pikes when you're playing as Isengard, and I think one of the things in particular that the Arnorian player with his composition, Jova over here, 3 units of dismounted Dunedain knights is overkill on a unit which is honestly not hugely effective against Isengard. Isengard are very good at dealing with armoured heavy infantry, and that is exactly what the dismounted Dunedain knights are. If I were playing as Arnor in this situation, I would have gone for Dunedain bodyguard and the Dunedain troll slayers, because that ranged power would definitely have stood you in good stead. And then obviously, you know, stuff like, as Arnor, you're always going to have to rely on your armoured units to an extent, and initially those Arthedain knights did a very good job, but I feel as though waiting for too long might cost them here. You can see that those Uruk-hai crossbows are pulling back. Do they still have ammunition? This alcove, again, the fight has not really progressed too long, because you can still see catapult crewmen that are still alive, as well as Arthedain knights. Well, not Arthedain knights, Arthedain men-at-arms. And another catapult crew. There's Arnorian heavy archers as well. Ultimately, this is exactly the sort of fight that Isengard are going to want in this situation. The pikemen are going to excel in a gap like this, and ultimately the Dunedain Rangers have not been able to do enough damage. And that's where the Troll Slayers could have come in, because then in melee they could have done a job as well with those nice battle axes. What's going on over here? Sindar archers and Galatharan veterans. So they're going to be committed forward now, and these are the kind of units that Isengard don't do too well against usually. You know, the pike line has stood firm, but will this finally be the moment that the gate is breached? You can see the Arnorian catapult just abandoned after the crew was cut down by the half-orc Vanguard. So what about the reserves for Isengard? Isengard, you know, they have their trolls, which are of course depleted, but other than that, the only thing they haven't committed are 2 bodyguards. So ultimately, the Arnorians could well yet be the saviours. We shall see. Over here we can see the Nazkai sort of pulling out of melee. I think they're going over here to help deal with the Elven elites, and their presence against the Elven elites will probably be sorely needed, because the Sindar archers and the Galatharan veterans, despite the fact they are archers, they are also the most effective of Lothlorien's infantry in the current patch, especially the Galatharan veterans with their grossly incandescent golden armour. Again, I think that the Sindar archers have got noticeably more ammunition than the Galatharan veterans, but less missile damage, and the Galatharan veterans are better in melee. Even so, Lothlorien trying to effect some sort of advance. They will need some support, I think. If Arnor supported them with something, I mean, even if it's Gondor, just with those Lasarnak nobles, I think that these elven elites, they need help. So what have we got here? So once again, the defenders have taken the lead by 1%, but I think at this point they have run out of crossbow bolts, which may well prove to be the kicker. The Nazkai are sort of waiting, which I don't blame them for. And again, this pike line is going to fall at this point. The elite elves, and then there's just like 5 Dunland veterans coming in to join the fight. Oh, hello. Some serious backup is arriving now. The Nazkai bodyguard, the strongest unit they could commit, has come forth. I don't know how this is going to go, honestly. The Nazkai bodyguard traditionally do better against armoured units. Again, I would definitely want those Nazkai in the melee as well to support them. It looks like that's what's going to be happening. So Nazkai against the finest of Isengard, against the finest of Lothlorien. Honestly, I would back Lothlorien in this fight, if not for the fact that there was a lot of sort of chaff over here as well. So there's a lot of crossbows that are out of ammunition. There's still pikemen. They still have some crossbows that have ammunition. It's only a unit of 28, but the chip damage they're going to be doing could well prove to be very, very significant. Meanwhile, if we look over here, Isengard is actually forcing them back. Again, Arnor, they need to send forward more men to help out. The Dunedain Wardens are coming forward, multiple HP spears. I think that their presence was needed sooner, to be honest with you. That's to be the sort of rock that helped with the advance over here. I can't change too much of that now. There's still a lot of range fire coming in. These Dunedain Rangers still firing, doing some damage, but ultimately they're probably running quite low on ammunition as well. How effective they're going to be in melee, I'm not sure. A lot of the Isengard forces should do quite a good job. The catapult is getting into position now. Again, I'm not sure how how useful it's going to be. Someone's general died. I would assume... Well, that could have been Lothlorien's or Isengard's. Either one of the well, it could have been either Pizza Maker's general or the Lothlorien general, and I was very wrong. The Nazkai proving their might as they sort of slice their way through the Lothlorien archers. And again, the Nazkai bodyguard, they're very similar to the Nazgul in many ways, and that's how I would look at them. Just pick them as a Nazgul, which individually they're not quite as strong, but if you embed them in another unit, they last for a long, long time. If you can isolate them, however, they do go down pretty quickly. Nazkai bodyguard, and it does fit as well, because obviously these are the Uruk-hai, or Nazkai, that are created as a result of Saruman having the One Ring. That's how it works in the Divide and Conquer campaign anyway, and that's kind of a neat thing. Was Saruman right all along? That is the question. And here we can see that battle-ready Dunedain are joining the fight, but again, too late. I would have said that if Arnor had managed to get these guys into battle sooner to help the elves, things would have gone much more smoothly for them on this front, and you can see there's dismounted Dunedain knights following them up as well. But the pike line still stands firm. I mean, yes, they're very depleted at this point. There's only 60 of them. But even so, they still have not been able to get through the pike line, either here at the gate or over here at the alcove. In fact, over here at the alcove, they are actually starting to make some inroads. Although it is only crossbows that are out of ammunition that are in melee over here. The Dunedain Wardens leading the way. They need to do something over here, because things are... Their options are rapidly dwindling here, the attackers. There's battle-ready Dunedain over here. The Arthedain Knights as well, some Dunedain Knights. But you can see there's basically nothing in reserve. There's still those General's Bodyguard and the Lasarnak Nobles from the Gondorian player. Again, I'm wondering if he's AFK. No, he isn't, because the Lasarnak Nobles are moving in. So they have coordinated for this final assault.
Changes in the course of battle, for defeat seems almost certain.
We are rapidly approaching the final 10,000 frames. And at this point, I would give the edge to the defenders, honestly. I would say that the Uruk-hai have got the attackers where they want them. The attackers don't have anything in terms of ranged advantage. They're divided. If we look here, although to be fair, the attackers have pulled ahead by 1% again, so it is fluctuating quite a bit. That depleted unit of crossbows still has ammunition. A unit of 28. The Nazkai is here. There's the couple of trolls, which will be committed when needed. You can see that ultimately the Elven elites, when the Nazkai came here in force, were just not able to stand up. And I'm surprised, actually. I'm surprised how quickly. I would assume it's because of the help of the crossbow support, how quickly it happened. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if slowly the Nazkai won, but with the help of the crossbows, it's going to be too much. And you can see in the background over there, the Sarnak nobles ready to charge in. They don't have HP, so this is a fight that they're kind of outgunned in, with the Nazkai and the battle-ready Dunedain all over the place, but the armour piercing of those axes could yet prove to be a pretty substantial factor. We shall see. I'm not entirely sure how the attackers are going to deal with the amount of Nazkai that's still alive. There's still a fair amount of pikes as well. If you look over here, the Gondor General's bodyguard, I mean, again, this was always going to be a bit of a risk. If you feel as though the defenders are going to sally out with cavalry, then it's kind of worth it. But in this situation, on this map, against Isengard in particular, who you know are going to bring a lot of pikes, it's always going to be a questionable choice. I mean, it did manage to get something done earlier on, but the General's bodyguard is pretty expensive. Here we can see the Isengard catapult trying to get into a position, but ultimately I don't think they're going to be able to get into a place where they can use it effectively. And over here, the Nazkai bodyguard, Pizzamaker's Nazkai bodyguard are starting to take a few losses. You can see that the battle-ready Dunedain doing a decent job over here, and these Sindar archers still alive. Ultimately, the crossbows still firing, still getting a few kills. The pikes still alive. The presence of these Arnor catapults is making it more difficult for the Isengard pike line to get re-established, to be fair. There's still these trolls ready to come in. There's only 3 of them left. Most of them died up here. But again, I feel like there's only been a few mistakes from both sides, and I feel as though the defenders have acquitted themselves very well here as well. Again, you can't really afford to make too many mistakes when you're outnumbered as the defenders, so I think the defenders deserve a lot of credit for how close this match is, even if they don't end up winning. Those crossbows, though, so venomous. And again, in the next patch, their ammunition will be reduced. Thank the Lord. Those dismounted Dunedain Knights and those Sarnak nobles just sort of hanging around. I think the dismounted Dunedain Knights might be committed. Yes, they will be. So again, this is another elite unit, and honestly the Nazkai's presence over here might start to dwindle. This unit of standard Nazkai has still got quite a lot left in the unit, but the bodyguard variant was starting to drop down a little lower. In fact, they might have retreated entirely. Yes, they did. They got out of dodge. The catapult is going to start firing, I think. So again, a point-blank hit into the centre of those Dunedain Knights would pretty much seal the deal for me. And of course we still have...
Defeat seems almost certain.
Again, the announcer still thinks that Isengard can't win this. And again, they are still 1% behind. All of those elites from the attackers. What's going on over here? Over here is actually a place where the attackers might start to see some joy, because the Dunedain Rangers, the Dunedain Wardens and the battle-ready Dunedain, the sort of the more Eriador-esque style units in Arnor's roster, are starting to make a bit of a push over here. Although having said that, there is still a unit of standard Nazkai and Nazkai bodyguard over here, which should be enough to halt this advance in its tracks. But we'll see. I mean, if they can push through here, they would then be able to sort of charge into the backs of these units over here, and that would be it. This unit of Uruk-hai infantry that's in reserve honestly might need to charge in and help them, to be honest with you. You can actually see some of the battle-ready Dunedain. They are pushing forward now. Pushing with that mass, with the spears at the centre. If they'd done that sooner, this battle might have been substantially less close than it is. The catapult, you know, one good hit might be the difference between victory and defeat here. There's still those Sarnak nobles in reserve. The crossbows are still doing some damage, but ultimately not as much as they were earlier on in the fight. This is a close one, I like it. Crossbows still firing. Will the elites of the Free Peoples of Middle-earth be enough to overcome Saruman's finest? I don't know. It's It's this area over here where I think the defenders might actually lose this fight now, because the pike line is being buckled. At long last, the Arnorians are able to effect some kind of really effective advance. The Nazkai over here will still be a really tough ask. I mean, it might come down to just a fight between like one unit versus one unit, and if it's the Nazkai, it's going to be difficult for the attackers to deal with that. There's still another unit of dismounted Dunedain Knights though. Could that third dismounted Dunedain Knight be the difference? There's still those Arthedain Knights as well. So ultimately, will Arnor's conservative play end up being the reason why they win? It's going to be interesting. I mean, at this point you can see that this Nazkai bodyguard, they might be turning around, they might be joining the other fight, and in fact this unit of Uruk-hai infantry certainly is. In come the Uruk-hai infantry, getting a charge into the side of the battle-ready Dunedain. The battle-ready Dunedain are actually starting to pretty substantially lose their unit models. There's only 22 of them remaining, and they're shaken. A breaking of their elite units would be a huge... Well, that was primarily friendly fire. That was not, however. That was right down the line. And you can see that that's a huge rout. Just as I was saying, a break from the attackers' elite units would be absolutely back-breaking. That could be why the defenders win. That was clutch. I mean, they got a ton of friendly fire from that, so it could have very easily counted against them as well. I mean, I think they're coming back. No, actually, they're not. What's going on there? The Nazkai bodyguard sort of pulling out of the fight, I think. The dismounted Arthedain Knights are still there. That one hit from the catapult might well justify its inclusion in the Isengard army. Those crossbows still have their crossbows out, but over here the defence is also starting to look a little bit thin on the ground. Those Nazkai, defeat is almost a certainty. The dismounted Dunedain Knights, the tanks that they are, starting to prove why they're one of the most fearsome heavy infantry units in the game. Really forming the heart of this attack here in the late game. A lot of these crossbow bolts are hitting the Arnorian catapult as well. What's left of the trolls is being committed. They'll get a few more kills on these Dunedain Knights. Again, every kill is going to be important at this point in the game. How's it going? It's dead even again, 92% to 92%. That break though, that break. The Uruk-hai infantry, the Nazkai bodyguard, they're pursuing Arnor into this alcove. And they're going to have to fight the dismounted Arthedain Knights. The Arthedain Knights are not AP, which might well be the difference here. They don't have HP either, which might well prove to be their downfall in this sort of fight. They're still a very good unit though, so they will still do some pretty hefty lifting, particularly against the standard Uruk-hai, less so against the Nazkai. You can see over there. Do the Dunedain Rangers still have ammunition? That could be pretty key as well. Some skirmish fire coming in. This is a very back and forth fight. It's a very good fight as well. I'm glad Pizza Maker sent this to me. Now this could be interesting. The General's bodyguard, are they going to try and push their way through? This could be the moment in which this one cavalry unit justifies its inclusion. I mean, if they get caught on the Nazkai, then they're doomed. So they do need to be very careful. But let me just get onto over to the other side. Those dismounted Dunedain Knights, defeat seems certain. So it looks like at the gate, with the inclusion of those trolls, Isengard is going to be able to win. Can the cavalry push its way through? The pikes are here though, that's the problem. Look at the cavalry's going crazy. They're taking damage as they go through, but ultimately they're going to make it through. They're going to make it. This Nazkai bodyguard of Pizza Maker 90 needs to turn around and engage. I mean, they could go for the town centre at this point. I mean, they would definitely be turned around on and ganged up on then. You can see those General's bodyguard, a lot of them have got caught though on the trolls, and now they don't have the mass to keep pushing through. So are they trying to go for the catapult? I mean, this General's bodyguard is charging around. Are they going to go for the town centre? Yes, they are. They're going to kill those crossbow men first of all. They won't be able to take the town centre though. Not if, like, a unit of Nazkai comes. This will force Isengard to turn around some of their units though. Another general died in a choke point, so we don't know whose it was. I think that might actually be Cole's, simply because I don't think Arnor's general is actually committed in there yet. Actually no, it must have been Gondor's. the General's bodyguard was charging through there just a second ago, wasn't it? I'm surprised they didn't sort of stay in the town centre, unless there was sort of an agreement that you don't take the town centre. But in this case, I think it would be okay. I think it would be okay to sort of force the defenders to sort of have to turn around and sort of engage the cavalry in the town centre with units, and that would also take away from the outer defence in some fashion. But I think ultimately here the dismounted Arthurdane Knights are being joined by the dismounted Dunedain Knights, which over here will start to put a bit of a strain on this defence. There goes the last of the General's bodyguard, routing and destroyed. It might have actually routed the unit, to be fair, because a lot of it was still engaged with the unit, so he might have lost control of it, to be fair. Here come the Lasarnac nobles. It's going to be a bit of a last, sort of, a brave last effort here from the Gondorian axemen to try and do something in this fight. Still, the crossbows have ammunition. It is a bit ridiculous, let's be honest. But it has made for a very exciting battle here. And as you can see, the defenders are pulled ahead by 2%, and I would say at this point that Isengard have it. It was a brave effort from the attackers though, but then usually in this situation the attackers do have the advantage going into it. 3 armies against 2, and I think that both the defenders did a really good job here. The Lasarnac nobles again. This is the problem with the Lasarnac nobles next to a lot of others. They don't have HP, so while they are a pretty good unit to use against Isengard in general, unsupported like this, they're just going to get cut to pieces. And there's still trolls left alive, although to be fair, that troll just got completely destroyed by that one axeman. So they're sort of fighting to the last. A point-blank shot from the catapult. That break that the catapult made, that might well be the reason they win, because that was a unit of Dunedain Wardens, Dunedain Rangers, and battle-ready Dunedain that he broke. And it looked like Arnor was going to break through on that front as well. It was so clutch of this catapult to do that, and then here come the Lasarnac nobles, broken. To be fair as well, Arnor eventually, it's taken them a long time, but they have managed to sort of break through the pike line over here into this alcove, well, into the side entrance of Helm's Deep, but ultimately it's going to be too little too late. The dismounted Dunedain Knights. And again, I think if Arnor were maybe just a little bit more aggressive when it counted, the attackers would have had this one, but ultimately Isengard's defence has held firm. A lot of it was based on the crossbows, of course, but also late on the elite Nazkai standing firm against the finest that the Elves of Lothlorien and Arnor could throw at them.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
So Rohan, the men of Rohan, lost Helm's Deep, and now the Free Peoples have failed to take it back. Orthank's power grows. But yeah, these dismounted Dunedain Knights, as we sort of come towards the end of this fight, it's really just a matter of clean-up now. There's still a troll left alive. What's going on over here? We can actually still see some rangers, which I think are just going to be charged into melee. Sort of a glorious death in close quarters is all that they can hope for now. And the Dunedain Rangers have been firing for a long time. It wouldn't surprise me to know that they were the ones that got the most kills for the Arnorians, to be fair, because they were firing into those pikes for a long time, but the pike line was just too thick, too strong. The Lothlorien catapult crew is still alive as well, with their little blades, and now they shall be sent forth to try and deal with Nazkai. These dismounted Dunedain Knights. I really like the shields on the dismounted Dunedain Knights as well. The armour in general is a really nice design from vanilla. Another really nice looking unit though is the Nazkai. Those helms. Previously it was reserved only for the Isengard General, but now it's been made for a whole unit. The Nazkai bodyguard as well with their shields. The crossbow's still firing, that might be a little bit overkill.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
Saruman getting a kill. He can afford to be very pleased with his army's performance today. Let's have a look. So yeah, we can see over here the Dunedain Rangers, the Nazkai. Only 10 of them remaining, and yet still victory is a distinct possibility in the face of 30 Rangers. Dunedain Rangers, of course. Rangers in general are just not a hugely effective unit in the current patch. They're good at range, but their light armour means they're too easy to beat in a skirmish fight. And of course in melee they're just too lightweight usually. In the next patch, when they have body piercing added, which means they'll be able to shoot their arrows through more than one target that's in a tight formation, that will change the dynamic of Rangers quite substantially. But for the time being, I think maybe they're a little bit too expensive for what they offer. There's that catapult crew which is routing and just sort of standing in place, frozen with fear. And then over here, you can see as we approach the final 1,000 frames, we're just a few hundred frames outside of it. I think that the defenders deserve this victory. I mean, yes, if you sort of limit the crossbow ammunition a little bit more, probably the attackers may have been able to do a little bit more. But having said that, the defenders do still have quite a lot of elite units left. Like, what they have left is still some pretty substantial Nazgûl presences. And also, the attackers could well have won if Arnor was a little bit more aggressive, in my opinion. I think that initially, they could have possibly used their artillery on the walls a little bit more. But I think the Gondorian and the Lothlorien player were aggressive where it counted, and then what they needed was then for Arnor to be the next wave, and with his elites to just punch through. And when those Dunedain Wardens and battle-ready Dunedain were about to punch through, in my opinion, they needed the support of the Arthedain Knights and the Dunedain Knights, but unfortunately, wave by wave suited Isengard a little bit more than it did Arnor today. And the AP capabilities of Isengard also came out in a big way, and there goes the Arnorian general, destroyed by Saruman and his lackeys. So is that it? It might well be it. What's going on over there? The catapult crew is routing. Still another unit somewhere around here. Oh, I see. We've got one dismounted Arthedain Knight, the banner carrier. Look at this. He's brave. Well, I mean, he can't exactly run away because he's just going to get destroyed, so they're toying with him a little bit here. Oh, he's going to charge in. Oh, he managed to get a kill as well. he shivved a Nazgûl bodyguard in the ribs and managed to kill him. He's not going down without a fight. Good man. And if you're going to fight in a last stand, fight the strongest unit your enemy has. Oh, here comes a troll. Well, there he goes. Destroyed. And there we go. So that was a fight on Helm's Deep, and it's been a while since I've shown Helm's Deep, and that was a very enjoyable one. Again, Arnor getting a decent amount of kills. Lothlorien in particular did well, because Lothlorien as a faction match up very well against Isengard. Gondor doesn't, and Arnor does, but I don't think the pick from Jova was really what was needed against Isengard in this situation. Let's have a look at the stats here. So this is Pizza Maker's stats, and then we have Coles just below, so we can have a look at the defenders. So Nazgûl getting 317, they were committed slightly earlier, of course. The crossbows getting a decent amount of kills across the board, but in this situation you do often expect archers to get that amount of kills on a defense, so it's not too bad. Even though I do think that the kills that they got were mostly on, could have been elites or regular units, so it kind of is a little bit in flux. But then if we look at Cole's army down here, again 268 on crossbows. Mostly the crossbows did the work. Again, the most effective unit on the field for Isengard, I think, was that 329 on those crossbows. And again, the infantry did decently, but again, they were against elves and human factions, so you don't expect the Uruk-hai to get huge amounts of kills per unit. But again, Isengard were outnumbered, and they prevailed in this situation here at Helm's Deep. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.